Welcome to this very special session of the Writers Guild with Tariq Ali. Of the millions of words that spewed forth in the wake of 9/11, it was a single, simple sentence that uttered by Tariq Ali that has stayed with me the longest, a startlingly unsentimental assessment that cut through the tsunami of emotion that swept across the globe. The attacks on New York and Washington were more spectacular than important, Tariq told an interviewer, explaining that there was no correlation between the size of an explosion and the number of deaths and its political and military significance. Wow, this guy is brave, I thought. The mood in those days and weeks following 9/11 was so incendiary, so fired up with patriotic fervour, that I wondered if Tariq would make it through to Christmas. I was similarly concerned for Susan Sontag, who, in The New Yorker, declared, "America got what it deserved after decades of imperialist exploitation." This was the notion of blowback. It was his calm, coolly analytical, historically informed approach to the most emotionally inflamed of situations that made Tariq Ali compulsory reading and listening in the years following the attack and the invasion of Iraq, for anyone desperate to look beyond the headlines and discover what is really going on. While the commentariat and blogosphere was seething with arguments for and against going to war, Tariq was quietly explaining that the real problem was his homeland, Pakistan, not Iraq. If only they had listened. Tariq brings the same lack of sentimentality and informed clear-sightedness to his latest book, The Obama Syndrome. One would naturally assume that one of the world's leading non-white intellectuals would welcome America's first mixed-race president. After centuries of exploitation, brutality, and oppression, surely a thinker and activist who has spent all of his adult life fighting on the side of the downtrodden would greet the elevation of Barack Obama to the White House with glee. But no, Tariq does not care if the leader of the world's last remaining superpower is black or white, man or woman. He wants the US leader to have the fortitude to bring about genuine change, not pay lip service to it. Instead of yes we can, Tariq wants yes we bloody well will. While Barack Obama has crumbled in the face of Republican and corporate deception, power and manoeuvring, the same cannot be said for Tariq, who has maintained the rage ever since his days as one of the most famous and influential leaders of the anti-war movement of the 1960s and early 70s. His contemporaries may have been absorbed by mainstream politics, the academy or big business, but Tariq has continued to speak out and to write, expanding beyond political essays and books to filmmaking, the novel, theatre and literary criticism. Tariq's range is dizzying, with his political intelligence and historical knowledge enlivening and enriching so many different forms. The attack on the Twin Towers pushed Tariq's already remarkable career into a new phase, in which his attention moved towards the Middle East, yielding a remarkable series of books, including The Clash of Fundamentalisms, Bush in Babylon, Rough Music, Blair Bombs, Baghdad, London, Terror, The Duel, Pakistan on the Flight Path of American Power. Not surprisingly, he's one of the media's go-to guys during this remarkable period in which corrupt American-backed regimes are tumbling across the Middle East, an event that Tariq has been predicting for some time. We are fortunate enough to have a man at the centre of the debate and not an ageing rocker on a last farewell tour. Tariq has also managed to write a magnificent memoir of his years as an activist, which takes in his friendship with Malcolm X, his visit to Vietnam at the height of the war, a close encounter with Che Guevara just before his capture and murder in Bolivia, being invited to dinner by Marlon Brando, and not being able to stay overnight for dinner because he had previous appointments with Henry Fonda and Laurence Olivier. And having not one but two anthems of our era written in his honour, Street Fighting Man and Power to the People. Clearly, Tariq, you didn't make enough of an impact on Bob Dylan to complete the trifecta. Tariq Ali.
Thanks very much, Mark, for those kind words. When Obama was first elected, or actually to be more precise, during his election campaign, I was in the States 3 or 4 times that year, observing the campaign, lecturing myself, talking to young people on campuses. And the enthusiasm was something I hadn't witnessed in the United States amongst young people since the 60s and 70s, when they fought in the anti-war movement to try and stop the war their country was waging in Vietnam. And the excitement, the enthusiasm was really very moving, and I was moved. And often I would be questioned at campuses, well, what do you think? And I really had to bite my lip because I didn't want to dampen their enthusiasm. And then they won. The victory celebrations were tremendous, and we had a new president, a mixed-race president. The first time a person of color had entered the White House that had largely been constructed by slaves, slave labor. So the symbolism was important, and I never underestimated it. But finally, you get over these things, and you have to judge a politician, especially the President of the United States of America, the only imperial country left in the world today since the collapse of the European empires and the Soviet Union. You have to assess and judge an American president not on the basis of the fine words he speaks and utters, but on the basis of what he does. That always must be the criteria for judging any politician, left, right, center, whatever. What they do, not what they say. Because if you fall into the trap of simply appreciating what they say and forget what they do, you lose sight of politics and what is taking place in the world. So, Obama's tragedy, if you like, though that's a bit mild, his bad luck is that he was elected president at a time when the United States and the advanced capitalist countries of Europe were going through the most acute economic crisis, which shook everyone since the Great Depression of the 20s and 30s. That was the reality. And here now you had a choice. Wall Street had collapsed. What do you do? Bush decided that the main thing to be done was to bail it out, and Obama carried on. And it is not that there were other voices not present saying, don't do this. Voices from the Democratic Party themselves. Voices which included one of Obama's biggest backers in terms of individual donations, George Soros, the financier. And Soros went public 6 months after Obama's election victory and said, this guy is a disaster. We need a new deal. I know that. I know what money is. I know what money does. But I also know what happens to a country when the poor are left to crumble. And what we need is, and I'm quoting George Soros now, he said, what we need is a new deal with large-scale state expenditures on huge projects to create employment. That is what we need. Totally ignored. The number of unemployed carried on rising in the year 2009. By August, the official statistics said that 15 million Americans were out of work. That is the official figure. The unofficial figure, you can add another 5 to 6 million to that. People who are in part-time work of such, in which really is no work at all in many cases. You know, people working half an hour a day counts as being employed. So the real figures were shocking. And by the end of 2009, the statistics revealed that the gap between rich and poor had actually risen in the first year of the Obama administration in favor of the rich. And this attitude of the administration of ruling on behalf of everyone. Obama declared during his campaign, the people preferred not to notice it, but he meant it, that his favorite American president was Ronald Reagan. That this was the president he admired because he united America. Well, there are many who would disagree with that assessment, but never mind. But if that is your aim, to be like Reagan and rule for the whole people, then what it does is debases politics, really, because you're not elected to be Ronald Reagan. You're elected by a largely Democrat electorate, including millions of young people who have never voted before and who were brought into politics for the first time, and you offered to do something for them. You didn't promise much, but you did offer some things, and none of these things that were promised have been done. And that creates a cynicism which goes very deep and can become very corrosive in a society, especially in the United States, but not exclusively. And so the economic crisis continued, and the bailouts of bankers reached trillions of dollars of taxpayers' money utilized to save Wall Street. And this is a Wall Street for whom capitalism was not, as it used to be in the old days, about making money from the production of things, but this was making money from money. Money that didn't exist was invested, lost, and then finally one day the bill came home when one company collapsed. And the notion that if they had saved Lehman Brothers, all would have been well is also nonsense, because the crisis had by that time gone too deep. Mortgage companies were closing in. There are horrific pictures and documentaries being made on poor people encouraged to buy mortgages on the cheap, not being able to pay them back since the crisis and a rise of unemployment, and their mortgages being taken. But the interesting thing is this, that the difference between the United States and some other parts of the world is that when the mortgage companies foreclose, in some areas and regions, you have to carry on paying even though you've lost your house. So the misery was great. The immiseration taking place was on a high level, and it is into this atmosphere that you had populist Tea Party types coming and attacking the fat cats and playing on populism because the left was paralyzed. Obama was their president. They'd invested all their hopes in him, and when he was shown to be a rather weak president, people in the Tea Party were not, it was a combination of different things. There was libertarians in the Tea Party who were against the state doing anything, including not bailing out the banks. Their line was, let the banks go under. America will be healthier. And that did strike a chord with many people. They were also, the libertarians in the Tea Party, Ron Paul in particular, was totally opposed to America's wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. He said it isn't our business. Things that the left was unable to say was said by some of these people, which is why they got some support. One has to understand that and why it happens. So Obama, in the face of this, did not produce a single policy that could rejuvenate, re-excite, reignite his supporters. And at the midterm elections last year, he lost, as everyone knew he would. And the reason he lost is not that the Republicans turned out in huge numbers to dwarf the Democrat vote, but many Democrats didn't come out to vote. So we were back into the syndrome of American politics. Politicians let the people down and they stop voting. It's a disease which is spreading all over the world, by the way.